But have any of you ever like gone to a tax sale or
No.
or a sheriff's sale? Okay, because before I do things, I tend to want to know about them. So, you go, you see. It's not a bad idea to go, even if you're not ready to buy, just to see it. So, I'll start a little bit with sheriff's sales. Now, there's going to be things in here that I think are kind of scary, but I think there's, and we'll talk about it towards the end, I think there's opportunities outside of what you're probably thinking related to the process, and it'll make sense at the end. So what kind of things get a property to a sheriff's sale? So the most obvious one would be a mortgage foreclosure. So it could be a first mortgage, could be a second mortgage. Those are the most common. Could be a judgment lien, could be municipal foreclosure. You'll see some on the list now that are like the levy fee, anything like that. They usually, it's mostly to get people to pay. They're the only ones. I've never seen like a sewer lien taken to foreclosure, but some of the levy fees I think were actually on the sheriff's sale list, but they end up getting paid before it actually gets to the auction. But
like mechanics liens on there?
Could be. I've never seen one because in all likelihood,
foreclose on a mechanic.
You can't.
I think you probably can, but probably not a primary residence, because I know with judgments that's how it works. So if I go get a judgment against a former tenant, if they go buy a primary residence in cash, I can't foreclose on a primary residence. But with a judgment lien, I can foreclose on an investment property, because I actually threatened to do that once. I had a judgment lien against a former tenant, and she owned a vacant uninhabitable home in Wilkes-Barre, and she had another judgment, so that other judgment was ahead of me in line. They were in the first lien position, but it was 4 years old. And judgments are only good for 5 years unless you keep going to court to revive them. So I waited like a year for that judgment to go away because they didn't revive it. And once I was in first lien position, I went and looked, and she had managed to sell it to somebody in cash who didn't get title insurance. So I found the new owners who lived next door to the property, and I went to them and I told them, I have a lien against the house you bought. You need to pay. It was difficult because they didn't speak English. I had to have their 12-year-old daughter translate. I worked through the lawyer that did the closing, and they set up a payment plan. The lawyer collected all the money, and when they had it all, they paid me. I only made them pay about 75–80%. But when you're collecting judgments, collecting judgments is very difficult. So anytime you can collect anything, it's like a big bonus. But,
so, did you put the lien on it after she sold it? Or?
No. That has to be before. So the way a judgment works is, you get a judgment. If it's not paid within 30 days, you can take the delinquent judgment. You have to go get like an official copy from the magistrate, and you take it to the prothonotary office and you record it. And at that point, it becomes a general lien on anything they own in the county. Then, if you want to actually do something with it, you have to go through the sheriff's office to get them to do something like foreclose or go take their car away or whatever other things you can do, but you're spending money to do that and hoping to get money back. I just used the threat. Once it was recorded, I had the lien against the property, and I just went right to the new owner. She had sold it in the interim, and if they had gotten title insurance, well, they wouldn't have ended up buying it if they had done a title search and gotten title insurance. They were told they should. They didn't want to spend the money to do it. It just is what it is. That was their, they were told, because I talked to the lawyer who represented them and the woman who translated for them with the lawyer, and they both said that, yeah, they were told. But anyways, there's all those kinds of things can get you to a sheriff's sale. And what I have on the handout is, this is right from the Luzerne County website. So, and I included the links in case you just want to go out there and look at it. So we'll just go through what the process is, the mechanics of it, and then we'll get into some of the other important things and opportunities. So the overview part, properties are sold for mortgage and judgment defaults, processed through the sheriff's office. So they do these like every 2 months now. So, and they have it, whatever, first Friday, yada, yada. So second paragraph, it's recommended that the interested parties consult an attorney prior to participating in a sheriff's sale, yada yada. So they're giving you that as a standard disclosure, because just because you buy something at one of these sales doesn't mean everything's perfect. So certain things don't go away. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you every which thing, but I'll give you some examples. And these things apply to both, I believe, sheriff sales and definitely tax auctions. So when you think about it, sheriff sales and tax auctions, these processes were created with state laws. Well, the state is never going to screw themselves, and they can't screw the federal government. So when you're buying something at one of these auctions, well, things that you owe to the state probably not being wiped away. And an example of that would be estate taxes. And this comes up in tax auctions more specifically. A lot of times with the tax auctions, the reason it ended up there is the owner died, and the heirs didn't know how, or just chose not to take control of the property. Might be in poor condition. They didn't think it was worthwhile. Didn't know how. Maybe they didn't know the property existed. But what happens is it gets delinquent on taxes and it goes to the sheriff's sale. But because the person died and they technically inherited it, even though they took no action, inheritance tax is due on it. So when you buy a property, like, I'm jumping to tax sales, but either way, with the inheritance tax, if they sell the house right away after the person dies, the tax is based on the sale price. But after, I forget if it's 9 months or a year, the state law says it's going to be based on the assessed value. So you could go buy a property at an auction, you might only spend 10 grand on it. But if it's assessed at 100 grand, you're paying the estate taxes on 100 grand to get it cleared. So you buy it at the auction. The auction isn't going to screw over the state. This is the state's tax. Well, you still have that issue on the title that you have to go and take care of later on. So you want to have that idea. If you know that the person's dead, you want to have some idea of what the tax is going to be based on, and you're going to want to know, hopefully, who the heirs were, because if the heirs were close relatives, like a child, it's one rate. But if it's a more distant relative, like a cousin, it's a higher rate. So if it's the lower rate, I think it's 4.5%. So if it's a child that inherited, it's 4.5%. Well, on 100,000, it's only 4,500. I forget what the higher rates are. It might be double that. Well, you could be talking several $1,000s difference. You know, it might be a matter of going out and finding obituaries and seeing, oh, survived by. Oh, well, they're survived by a child. Okay, well, you know, the child inherited, because it's, you know, there's a certain progression for inheritance. If they didn't have a will, you know, the state law, what the progression is. But those kinds of things, not making this process perfect or easy. And this is where it gets scary. So for the novice investor, these are the kinds of things that make it such that buying through the sales is more difficult. Just because it's more difficult doesn't mean that there's not opportunities here. So let's continue on. So the notice of the sale. So a listing of the properties sold can be obtained from the sheriff's office website, and that's true. They're really good now about adding those well ahead of time. I mean, they even have some out there for the sale in August already. There's quite a few. Sales are advertised in the Citizen's Voice, and they put handbills on the property themselves. Property can be removed from the list basically any time, so they can pay right up until the point of the sale. And this goes with tax sales too. You could be sitting. Last time I went to a tax auction, you're sitting at the tax auction. They're getting ready to auction off a property. Somebody raised their hand and says, you know, they're overpaying right now, and they're like, well, we can't verify it, so we'll set this one aside. We'll come back to it later, because they didn't want to auction off a property that was being paid at that moment. So they can pay right up to the last minute. So just beware that if you're spending money and time on something, you can come to the sale and it's not even still available. That's just how it is. Doesn't happen a lot, I'm sure, but it does happen. Access to the properties. So the sheriff's office doesn't have access. Technically, you don't have the legal right to go look at it. With a sheriff's auction, you have, and well, we'll kind of get to this a little later on. So the lender or the foreclosing party has an interest This is how they're getting paid. They're owed money. They want their money. They want as much as they can get. So, but they have more information about the property than you most times. So most times it's a first mortgage, a first mortgage that's foreclosing, and when they start the foreclosure process, they start sending people out to monitor the property. They have like a property preservation company that will drive around. It might be once a week or once every couple of weeks to see, is it still occupied? Is the property being taken care of? If it isn't, if the property becomes vacant, they will actually break into the property. They'll break into it and they will secure it, and then they will mow the lawn to make sure that it doesn't look vacant so people aren't breaking into it, stealing all the pipes. But they will take in, secure it, and care for it through the foreclosure process. But that also means that the lender knows something about the condition of the property, because they got people in there telling them what the condition is, sending them pictures. So they know what it is, and they're represented at the sale, at the sheriff's sale, to try to get the most money or to get good money for it or whatever it's worth. So they have more knowledge of the inside of the property than you might have. Now, with some of these properties, you might be able to sneak in, on the down low. That absolutely can happen. Probably more so with tax sale properties than sheriff sale properties, because probably more sheriff sale properties are probably still occupied or secured by the property preservation companies. So, but just be aware that the lender has more knowledge of the condition than you probably will. So let's see, access.